Situation is developing there. We reported earlier about Hamas accepting the ceasefire deal which was negotiated by Egypt and Qatar. We then reported that Israel had rejected this deal as being a watered-down version and objecting to what the finer detail was. Well, this is the situation in Tel Aviv, and it's replicated across Israel, but the biggest demonstration right now is in Tel Aviv. It began with families of hostages angry that this deal was rejected because they want to see their loved ones brought home from captivity. Don't forget, of course, there's about 100 still held since October the 7th. So these families very angry indeed, joined by an anti-war lobby and many people who are fed up with the situation as it is ongoing, and they're blaming more and more Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his far-right coalition for the situation. This is Tel Aviv. Similar scenes across the country. Let's take a look at our report.
What seemed like a glimmer of hope around a deal many expected to fail. Hamas says it has accepted a ceasefire agreement with Israel, mediated by Qatar and Egypt, leading Palestinians in Gaza to erupt in celebration only hours after the IDF had ordered them to evacuate the southern region of the enclave.
After Hamas agreed to the mediator's proposal for a ceasefire, the ball is now in the court of the Israeli occupation, whether it will agree to the ceasefire agreement or obstruct it.
But Benjamin Netanyahu says the deal which Hamas said it had accepted is far from Israel's demands, and the Israeli Prime Minister has approved an offensive in eastern Rafah.
Even though the Hamas proposal is far from Israel's necessary demands, Israel will send a working delegation to the mediators in order to exhaust the possibility of reaching an agreement under conditions acceptable to Israel.
The ceasefire deal was part of a three-phase plan to temporarily put down arms and exchange Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners, then to return the bodies of dead Israelis in Gaza. But Hamas reportedly didn't want to budge from its demand for a deal to end the war and IDF occupation. The US, Egypt and Qatar appeared to scramble to salvage a deal they had been pushing for over the past week. Egypt said it was in touch with all sides on Monday to prevent the situation from getting out of control.
Well, earlier we were joined by Irris Makler, our correspondent in Jerusalem, who of course has followed every step of this story. She gave us the reaction from there.
I can tell you that people are pouring out onto the streets of Tel Aviv tonight. It's the largest protests by far. Thousands of people joining the families of the hostages and adding to their anguish and adding to their turning to the government and saying, resolve this and bring the hostages home. And, you know, I guess the truth is that there's been a lot of discussion here about whether Benjamin Netanyahu has the interests of the hostages at heart or his own political interests at heart. And when you're a democratic leader in time of war, the people have to trust you. They have to trust you to be leading them for their interests. And I guess what this demonstration tonight tells you is that there's a large proportion of Israel's population who aren't sure that their leader is leading them in their interests or in the interests of the hostages, that he has his own political interests at heart. Many people here are asking that, and we can't say it didn't go forward, because here it is. It's a breakthrough night, you have to say, because Hamas has agreed to something. And it may not be exactly what Israel offered, but it is a breakthrough of sorts. It's whether Israel will go with that breakthrough. And, you know, Israel didn't send negotiators to Cairo. They have now said that they're going to send negotiators to Cairo. At the same time, you know, there's airstrikes in Rafah. And Israel's prime minister says those two things go hand in hand. Perhaps they do and perhaps they don't. And I think that's back to this problem of, do you trust your leaders to be acting in their interests or in your interests? I don't know that it's not going to happen. It is possible that even if the two sides sit down, they won't agree on the detail. We only heard from Hamas a decision in principle, an idea. But perhaps if there was, there's a lot of pressure within this right-wing government to finish the military operation in Rafah before the hostages are rescued, or as a means to rescue the hostages. And there's a lot of pressure from the streets and from the families to do it the other way around, and from a lot of military people too, by the way. I've heard a lot of military people arguing that Rafah will be there in 6 months, the hostages might not be. So that's where I think this tension comes from.
Irris Makler.